Cool, we're back. Midlife Strong.
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Good, man. Grateful to be here. I was thinking about, we talked about gratitude last week. And as cliche as it sounds, you know, like just getting here. I'm in Houston now, getting here to Orange County. Like the amount of like miracles that have to happen for me to get on a plane. For the flight to go, okay. Timing was like, it was one of those things just to remember, like, man, it's life is pretty good.
It's pretty amazing.
It's like, I'm just happy to be here. Despite everything, like most of us, right? It's a mixture of like hard and miraculous blessings at the same time.
When you're in it, when you're in something, when you're going through it, it's really hard to think like that.
Yeah.
But you do not have to be without worry, stress, drama to be able to, just breathe, sit back and look at all of that and say, wow, it is pretty amazing to be alive.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Of like, yeah, because like a lot of us are we got stuff, pretty common. But I think what's helped me is having examples. You know, just people, regular people, monks, pastors, athletes, like who do their best to embody what I hope to embody. You know, just kind of recalling on the people I read about or study. It's like I see a little bit of myself in that. Let's bring that forth.
It's like it's there, but it needs to be pulled out.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I hear you. Kind of in the same vein, but not. You know, I saw a video last night come up in the content feed, and it kind of blew me away. We're on a planet that's spinning in a vastness, and the vastness is only increasing. Like it never stops expanding. And when you look your child in the face and you have a moment with him, that's happening while we're spinning on a planet with billions of people in the middle of nothingness. It's really quite beautiful.
Last piece, and then I want to get into our Midlife Strong Q&A. Got some good questions. But on that same note, again, I saw in a content feed a psychoanalyst was saying when you deposit or invest into your inner life, I think he even said spiritual life, your unhappiness goes down. And simultaneously, when you deposit and invest into your physical health, your happiness goes up. And I thought that was a really good like frame of like, you know, kind of embodying both heaven and earth at the same time.
There are two levers that you constantly have to be engaging.
Yes.
Not necessarily one more than the other, but there are two levers that need constant engagement from me. Heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Cool. Midlife Strong Q&A. We did this for the first time on our last episode. Went really well. I think it gives us a chance to dialogue together about questions we're probably thinking about too, but in kind of like a format that's new to us. So this first one, I watch your clips, and I'm a 42-year-old executive juggling a demanding job, 2 young kids, and an aging parent who needs care. No matter how hard I try, I always feel guilty. Either I'm shortchanging my family or not giving 100% at work. You've talked about setting boundaries on the podcast before, but I still struggle. How do you personally manage to balance career and family in the middle of midlife without feeling like you're letting someone down?
Man, what a question. What a question. Shout out to that guy.
This could be a whole like episode, but
it could be 10 episodes. I think it's really important to first set boundaries with yourself. And when we think of boundaries, we usually think of them as something with another person. And they are and they can be. But like, what's the boundary you're not willing to cross with yourself? What's the time you're not willing to give up yourself? What is that line that you're not willing to cross for yourself when it comes to a relationship, a child? Because this guy, 43-year-old executive, aging parent, 2 kids, I mean, sounds like me, like you. Yep. And those responsibilities are not going to evaporate or decline. They're only going to continue. And so I think it's really, really important to ask yourself, clearly you know what your responsibilities are. Good for you. And you're doing a great job. I think that's the first thing, is just to recognize you're doing a great job. And that's a huge boundary you need to set with yourself. You need to set the boundary with yourself that you're not going to not praise yourself. You're not just going to let the day go through without telling yourself how great of a job you're doing, despite how much better you could be. Of course, we can always be doing everything better.
Yeah.
But that's a boundary. I'm not willing to cross the boundary of letting one day go by without me telling myself how good I'm doing. Mm. And I know there's a lot of room to the upside. That's never going to not be the case.
Sure.
But that's a boundary you have to set for yourself. Because if you cross that boundary one day, no problem. If you continue to cross that boundary week over week, month over month, years go by. Yeah. And you're the one doing the work. You're the one struggling. You're the one carrying those burdens. You may or may not ever hear from other people how great of a job you're doing. Why not hear from yourself?
Be on your own team.
I love that.
Be on your own team.
Be your own biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, we know you're going to be your biggest critic.
Sure.
We know you're going to be your biggest critic. Be your biggest cheerleader as well.
2 things based on what you said. One, it's interesting that you first went to setting boundaries like internally, like with yourself versus like externally. I guess unpack that for me. How do you do that for yourself, or just practically to this guy? Like, what does that look like?
I think from a practical standpoint, before you say, I'm going to give this person this much time intentionally this week, this day, today, whatever, before this person's able to say, I have to intentionally give my wife an hour a week. Those are kind of the easier lists to make. And I say that they're also difficult, right? To be able to splice the time for everything that needs and demands your time. But there's something much more important before that. What about the boundaries for yourself? What about the boundaries you're setting for self? Again, for the physical activity, for the quiet time, prayer time, meditation time. What about the things you're doing to put the oxygen mask, so to speak, right? We use that analogy a lot. Yeah. You can't help the others put their oxygen masks if you're not putting it on yourself, if you're not taking care of yourself first. Sure. And so I just think it's important to recognize that. That's all.
Yeah.
Because you can completely forego the boundaries with yourself, no problem, ignore them. You're going to eventually run into the same problem.
Yeah.
Because there's not going to be enough time to set all the boundaries and get everything done that needs to get done. You're going to expend yourself. You're going to end up pouring into everybody else. And meanwhile, your cup is empty.
It reminds me of that saying of like, you're running on fuel that's going to burn the engine along the way.
Or no fuel at all.
Yeah.
The engine's going to stop at some point.
Yep. So this is kind of about the theme here, starting over. I built a stable 20-year career in one industry, but at 45, I feel unfulfilled and daydream about starting something completely new. Your show inspired me to think outside the box. I'm worried that it's too late to make a big change, or that I'll risk everything I've built. How do you find the courage to pivot or take risks at midlife?
That's a tough one. But I thank that person for having the courage to ask that question. And so many other people are probably thinking the same thing, but aren't able to articulate it as well. And so everything's about balance. If you've built a stable career, my question would be, what's going to bring you the most fulfillment?
Sure.
Just put the risk aside for a second, because my gut, and a lot of people would disagree with this, I'd say go for it, risk it. Mm-hmm. I would. I say that to you, other people, all the time. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
You're one of the most, I don't want to butcher this, least risk averse. Is that right? I mean, you go for it.
Right.
And I love that about you.
Right.
Like, it's awesome.
So that would make me not risk averse.
Yeah, not risk averse. Right.
But that's the thing too. Like, I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Because there's some things that are not worth risking.
Mm-hmm.
So taking a leap and starting a brand new thing, it really depends on where you are in your life.
Yep.
If you have a wife and 3 kids and like kind of that's your role right now,
sure,
might not be the best idea to pick up something that took 20 years to build.
Yep.
As he just stated.
Yep.
Because these ventures and projects, they take a lot.
Longer and more resources than you think.
More time, more resources. So that's not to say don't do it, don't take a risk. You just have to assess where you are in terms of spectrum. Yeah, because you just don't want to be risking. You're always risking something.
Yeah.
Something's always going to have to give.
Sure.
When you're younger and you have more energy physically, mentally, more clarity, it's easier to take risks because there's not much to lose.
Yeah.
I would say I have more to lose now than ever.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about my family.
Sure.
I'm not willing to put them through what I put them through 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just, no thanks.
Yep.
Now, God willing, one day the kids are going to be older and venturing out on their own risks.
Yep.
Maybe then. And it's never too late. Like it's never too late. Yeah. I see these guys in their late 60s. They just created a monster, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah,
it's really never too late.
One thing I think about with this question is spending some time on what it is you actually want or need out of this like desire, and seeing if you can satisfy that with a lesser risk.
And that's why I asked. That's why the question is really important. What would bring you fulfillment?
Yeah.
What
do you actually want?
Yeah, because chances are it's not just a risk, or it's not just like you're stale and you want to try something else. Although that does happen, you know. So I get it, but like, what would make you just can't wait to wake up?
Yeah,
you're thinking about it, and it's making you fulfilled. And then the question, I think, goes a little bit deeper then, is like, what is true fulfillment for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
For anyone, but it's going to vary from person to person.
A canned response, just to kind of give it some context, 2 examples maybe, is like, maybe you were an ex-athlete and now you're in corporate life and you're like, I wish I just could be an athlete again. Well, instead of, trying to become like a paid Ironman athlete at 44, maybe just keep things the same and start training for an Ironman and do that and see if it fulfills like the need.
Yeah. Or dare I say, find some similarly situated people that like, maybe not the most athletic, but definitely there's something there. They would just need some guidance and some motivation, and you can embark on it together.
Right.
That sounds really cool.
For sure. 8:52. What do you think? You want to call it?
Let's do another one.
Okay. I'm a 48-year-old manager, and lately I felt completely burned out, even though by all measures I'm successful in my career. I remember you discussing the importance of finding purpose on one of your episodes when I'm struggling to rediscover what truly excites me. Everything's fine. The job is good. Family's needs are taken care of, but I just feel kind of empty. How do I get out of this slump?
Yeah. Another one. I love that we're getting these questions. This is like kind of what it's all about.
Yeah.
My gut tells me that the burnout, and this sounds very accurate. Sounds like a lot of what we've gone through, people we know have gone through. So the circumstances obviously might all be different from person to person, but like, what's burning you out truly?
Yeah.
And again, my gut is that cup is empty. Yeah. This person said that the family's good, the job is good. Like, it's kind of okay.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's a lot of what guys our age specifically, like, everything's kind of fine.
Yeah.
But we're just stir crazy inside. We're restless.
Yeah.
And so where is the burnout coming from? It could very easily be physical. You know that. Like, that's your specialty.
Sure.
Meaning that, like, the body's just weak and lethargic,
Yep.
not in great shape. But it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Like, the body could be in great shape.
Yep.
But, like, in here, it's just really lethargic. And so I guess my advice would be to kind of probe into what might be causing the burnout. Because I really do, like, I hear it a lot. Like, everything's fine, you know, the marriage is fine, the job is fine, but I don't know, like, I'm just tired, like, kind of over it. And immediately you're like, everything's fine. Why are you over it?
Yeah.
And what does fine mean, too?
Right.
Like,
Fine is a loaded word.
it really is.
Yeah.
I remember, and it happens to this day, you know, when I'm talking to my therapist, I tell you this all the time. Like, first question is, so how are you? And I'm like, I'm fine. And she's like, fine is not a feeling, right? So you kind of just have to, like, scratch the surface a little bit to get a little more granular.
Yeah.
And I think it's like they're all symptoms of the same disease.
Yeah.
Generally, we're just all running on empty.
Yes.
And there's not much going in that we're able to pour back out from.
Right. This question, two things for me. One, you alluded to it, like the physical part. I think as much as it's trending and people are hearing this, it's very important, right? It's like a stage one filter of, like, let's take account of your physiology. How's that supporting you or holding you back? Type of thing. Because the neuroscience and the research behind, you'll hear it now, it's like psychology is biology. Meaning, like, this physical body you're in is feeding and cultivating what's going on up here. And so I think that's always, like, a step one. Let's just, like, sit down and take account of, like, what's actually going on physically.
So a recent example of this, I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning to make a workout at 5.
Yep.
And I was fine. I was getting through the workout, but, like, right around, like, 9:30 or 10 a.m., I was, like, done.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what I was eating, you know, clean, protein, like, I was doing it all right.
Yeah.
And then I just realized, hey, I'm 42. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And I just pushed the workout to midday.
Yeah.
And man, I felt great waking up. I felt great going into the workout. I was re-energized after the workout. And the crash didn't occur until like 6:30 or 7, which is kind of normal.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
You should be on the decline around that anyways.
Right, because the day is almost over.
Yeah.
And it was like a really simple thing, but I don't know if it was just pride or ego or wanting to be at the gym at that hour or, and then I had to be okay with, I'm getting older. Things are working differently. I'd rather feel amazing all morning going into the workout and then re-energize for the second half of the day. And it's just such a small change physically.
Yeah.
And it changed everything.
I think that it sounds like acceptance. And, like, I don't think you should overlook that, because that's a state that you found, right? A feeling state that works for you.
Yeah.
That's so huge, especially with the life you got. It's like that. There's nothing more important than finding feeling states that work for you.
And the most important thing I think you just said is that the acceptance.
Yeah.
Because God, at this age, like, true freedom comes from surrender of every, like, we could talk about this for days. Yep. Like, freedom comes from surrender.
Sure.
I'm not carrying around this bag now thinking I have to do this at this time or that time or press. It's like, no, that's not going to work for me. Yeah. It never probably will work for me again. Yeah. And I'm okay with that.
I built a 20-year career in the industry, but at 45, I feel unfilled and daydream about starting something completely new. Your show inspired me to think outside the box. You know, I'm worried it's too late to make a big change or that I'll risk everything I've built. How do you find the courage to pivot or take risks at midlife? One thing I was going to add here, you kind of touched on it before we took a break, is get creative in what you're currently doing. Whether that's, you know, talking to your manager or owner, CEO of, like, hey, is there a way I can do something else within inside this container. And that way you can kind of still have like some footing, but maybe spark some interest in a slight pivot without blowing up your life.
Without taking a massive unnecessary risk.
Sure.
Because it all, again, just to go back to what we were saying, like risk varies from time to time.
Yep.
And the risks you might be willing to take 10 years ago are not necessarily the risks you're willing to take now because of things like your family.
Yep.
Because the risks that I took 10 years ago didn't involve my family as much as they did after I took the risk. Like, if that makes any sense, like it gets crazier and crazier. And I'm not willing to risk my family, and put them through some of the things that I put them through. I'm just not willing to do it.
Yep. Next one, a 50-year-old business owner. I sometimes struggle to connect with my younger employees and even my own kids. They joke that I still use email for everything while they're on messaging apps like TikTok. How do I stay relevant yet commit myself as a leader to the younger generations I either lead or to my kids at home?
That's actually a really good question. Fair. Because being a great leader, I don't think it has so much to do with relevance. But that's an important facet. But I think it has a lot to do with connecting with people.
Yeah.
And so if it just means that you need to find a way to connect deeper, then that's what it is. I don't think you need to use messaging apps versus email in order to connect more deeply with someone. I actually think that's missing the point entirely. Yep. But maybe if the connections were stronger elsewhere, some of those like relevant things wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I have hundreds of employees of various ages. The average is way less than what I am. And I think it's just about connecting with them about their actual interests.
Sure.
Which I do all the time. This one's into Jays. We talk about Jays, and this one's into the Lakers. We talk about the Lakers, and this one's into painting. And I'm like, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
It makes the other stuff much less relevant because it just sounds like
it just sounds a little bit like trying too much, a little bit.
I feel like just a message on TikTok for this, like, well, what's the point of that?
Yeah. Yeah. When I read this question, it was also putting myself in that position of people I either look up to or like admire who are older. And I don't know if I'd want them to be immersed or completely consumed in younger habits or whatever that is, because the reason I want to be around them or look up to them is because they aren't doing that in some ways.
Right. And the reverse might be disingenuous.
Yeah.
Like it would seem like you're just trying for the sake of trying.
Right.
I think the central theme here and the common denominator is that like human connection is valuable and much needed. Completely irrespective of like technological gaps in age.
Yep. Oh, one thought on that. He's actually out of Newport, I think. Let me remember his name. Dr. Amen. I think he's a psychiatrist. He wrote Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. But he said one way to connect with your kids, he's talking about parental models. He's like, if you can find a way for 20 minutes a day to do whatever your kid wants to do, if they want to play with Legos, if they want to do water guns at the park, if they want to just read a book, engage in what they want to do. And I think that alludes to what you said earlier, is like, just find what they're into and engage with that. Super simple, but like on the ground practical. It's like, just be interested in people.
So specifically as it comes to employees and coworkers, we let them choose their like their outings, their employee fun days, or at least bring the ideas, and then we choose
Sure.
together from them. But I think that's huge, and I think the parenting model is probably one of the most important, because what this person is saying is what we all go through or are going to be going through with wanting to connect with our kids. There's going to be an age gap. There's going to be a culture gap. There's going to be a technology gap. But none of that will ever be as strong as being able to connect with what they want to do and their interests and being invested in those things and caring about those things.
Sure, for sure. After decades of grinding through 60-hour work weeks, I'm noticing that my body isn't bouncing back like it used to. I'm over 50 now and recently had a health scare that made me realize that I can't ignore things like stress and sleep. You've emphasized self-care in some episodes, but I find it hard to actually slow down and do the things I need to do. Can you help me?
Yeah. These are incredible questions.
The real life questions.
and very, very like relevant to everything we go through, because like we talk about that all the time. So when we're younger, the body's much more resilient. It's much more pliable, physically and mentally. And so it's not that those stresses aren't there. It's just we're much better at, to use his language, bouncing back. Yep. The problem is as we get older, you know, there's a lot of wear and tear, physically and mentally. And I hear from a lot of, I'm going to say younger guys, but like, you know, the first time they have a panic attack, they're completely hit out of left field. They didn't expect it. And some of the things we try to do to not normalize them, but get them to understand is something happened in that moment. And your body just decided it was going to stop reacting the way it had always reacted.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a perfect storm that leads up to that. But okay, so it happened. Now we have to learn to deal with it, sure. Or they're going to become more frequent. They're going to become more disruptive. And I think the whole body kind of works like that too. You know, there's certain exercises that I'm just not going to do anymore. Right. You know, about 10 years ago, I was deadlifting an insane amount of weight, and, you know, caused an inguinal hernia. Mm-hmm. And I'm like deathly afraid to go near a deadlift anymore because of that experience. But also like, I don't need to do those things anymore. Not specifically deadlifting, but I don't need 4 or 5 plates on it. It's not going to get me anywhere. I'm not competing. I think there's a fine line with pushing the boundaries of your physical strength. Yeah. And it's important to get strong, but like to what end? Right. And so the question then becomes, because the body is not acting the way it used to, you have to take care of it differently. Sure. You have to give it breaks and rest and nutrition, even other things like sauna and massage that you might not have done before in your younger age. Right. If you want to keep it going, like if you want it to keep running, if you want it to get you, you know, to the 80s, 90s, whatever the goal is. But, and I think even then the question is very specific. You said psychology is biology. Right. Correct? Yep. It so is. Yeah. Psychology is absolutely biology. Yep. And so I am trying to keep my body healthy so that I can keep my mental faculties together. I think that's the shift that has to happen at whatever, 35 or 40. Because if you're hanging on to the notion of fitness as something that's purely athletic and aesthetic, and they are those things, but at a certain stage, the shift towards that practice has to, you just have to open up the aperture on what this is. Because it's like the map doesn't match the terrain when you get to 45 or 50. It just doesn't. All the great ones out there, and I'm kind of blanking right now. I'm sure you could throw out some names of very respectable physical fitness coaches. Yep. Their aim at this point is the longevity of the mind. Sure. You know, Jesus said something pretty awesome. He said the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Yeah. Just kind of indicating that there's such a connection. Yeah. And there's such a synergy between the body and the mind and the spirit that it almost doesn't matter how good one or the other is if they're not like in sync. Right. Right. You know, like if you're blessed enough that your mind is that strong, that your soul, that your spirit is that resilient. Yep. But the body can't handle it. Well, that temple, the body,
Yep.
that's the only vessel you have to get you to do those things that your mind is able to do.
Right. No, yeah, it's, I mean, from the example of Jesus all the way to like Eastern traditions too, like, meditation is having a moment in the last decade, 15 years, like everyone's talking about meditation, whatever. And I find it curious that a lot of people get involved. It's like becomes a very heady and like intellectual, almost esoteric in the head. When if you look at the text, particularly in the Eastern traditions, like mindfulness meditation, the first emphasis is on the body.
Right.
And that disconnect, I think we're coming around to it. But if you're not a monastic, if you're not like renouncing the world, if you're in the city per se, like you got to use this like container, this body to kind of elevate the mind and spirit in the best way possible. And I think we're catching up. But now it's more practical, right? And that leads me to this question this guy sent in. I guess the example I'd use is like if a business is doing well and you're turning profit year over year and it's growing, you don't close it down.
No.
If a relationship's going like really well, open communication, intimacy is great, you're growing both collectively, individually, you don't end it, right?
Sure.
With your physical practice, I think we need to inject that type of frame and find a path where progress is kind of like always growing, particularly at midlife, because if you don't feel like it's like working or there's progress, it's like a business. If you're 4 years in, 3 years in, or 3 months in, it's like it's not working, you're gonna shut it down. And so, I would say very practical. There's something called contingency planning, and you can use it across different domains. But with fitness, it's like, okay, I'm scheduled to do 3 workouts a week. If on any one of those days I can't get to the place, or if my trainer cancels, whatever, then I'm gonna do this. So what I'm pointing at is just adherence. Like if you plan 3 days and you get to the gym,
3 days,
the perfect plan goes as planned, awesome. But it's not going to all the time. So what's your contingency plan if you can't do the workout? Maybe it's a 10-minute body weight at home. But at least now you're like checking the box off and you're getting that progress feeling in your body, and it makes you feel successful at what you're doing.
Sure.
That sounds like very simple and almost like elementary. But at this age, if it feels like it's progressing, you're going to keep doing it. And you need to find what that formula is for you using that frame.
We overcomplicate a lot of things. And what I always end up going back to almost all the time is the basics.
Yeah.
We got to bring it back to the basics. And the basics are really important.
For sure. All right, next one. I'll admit, I recently splurged on a sports car on a whim. And my family teases me that I'm having a classic midlife crisis. And honestly, after years of being so serious with business, putting out all these fires and growing it to be something really big, I just want to do something truly fun for myself. Is this crazy? Have you ever done this? And how do I manage these impulses if I want to do it again?
So the impulse control is what I will say can get out of hand. But before we get into that, no, it's not crazy. If you've worked your tail off and you're tired and you have it and you can do it and it's fun and it's brought you some joy, awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yep.
I mean, I don't, we say this a lot. We're our own biggest critics, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves in addition to the pressure that's added on from the world, from society. It's okay to take care of ourselves. A whim like that sounds exactly like that word fun. It's just a fun whim.
Yeah.
The problem is if the impulses get out of control and it starts becoming destructive, disruptive, family finances, et cetera, et cetera. I think, that phrase midlife crisis, like we can have several hours worth of conversations about that. I think if it's just placed in that first bucket, like I worked really hard, I want to enjoy something fun and cool. I just haven't done anything like this. And I think it's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. That's not a midlife crisis. That's you patting yourself on the back and treating yourself for a lot of hard work.
Yep.
I think where it goes into the midlife crisis territory is when there's a pattern And the pattern is fairly disruptive.
Yeah.
And it could be disruptive to the individual's family, combination of both. But if I'm buying lots of sports cars and I'm going on weekly trips to Vegas and I'm partying until 4 a.m, which,
yeah,
I mean, I don't even know why anyone would do that. It sounds absolutely miserable
at this stage.
Right. Then you go into that like midlife crisis.
Yeah.
And I think it's an official term, right?
Yeah.
Midlife crisis, where the crisis is one of identity and fulfillment.
Sure.
If I could break it down as easily as possible, I think that's kind of where, and I think one of the coolest things ever would be to prevent the midlife from becoming a crisis.
Right.
To our listeners, to anyone who's watching, because it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It can be a complete like reevaluation for the better and a launch pad into the next best phase of your life.
For sure.
And that's what would give me the most fulfillment, is to prevent that quote unquote crisis part. Because again, the crisis is mostly about fulfillment.
Yeah.
There's something there.
Yeah.
There's something there. And what's the other word I said? Fulfillment and what?
Identity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know who I am, or I don't like who I am.
Yeah.
I think that's the main one. And there might be a lot of reasons to not like who you are.
Yeah.
There might be things you would like to change to make better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the root of that is to just really love who you are.
Yeah. I love what you said about like it doesn't have to be. Like the midlife point can be a reevaluation of what the next half looks like.
It could just be I'm in midlife.
Yeah.
And I'm taking all that research.
Yep.
I'm grinding it and processing it. I'm going to spit back something bigger and better.
Yeah. This was probably early on one of our episodes, but the symptoms of midlife crisis, if you will, you know, some things come up, where it's depression, PTSD, anxiety, or just like sub-threshold, subclinical feelings of those flavors, right? Instead of like just having them there and like obviously they're kind of like negatively toned, seeing them as like data and then asking, what is this trying to tell me?
Sure.
What does it want me to realize? So I think the questions you ask, if these things come up, are more useful than just getting to this point and saying, this is it. Like, this is what midlife is like. So if those symptoms do arise, whether it's clinical or subclinical, getting familiar and almost befriending depressive feelings or symptoms, like what is this actually trying to tell me?
And I think that's probably the thing we do the worst.
Yeah.
Because society just kind of feeds us what it should look like.
Sure.
And it tells us what's okay and what's not okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay to buy a sports car. It's okay to go.
Right.
Whatever. And that actually might make more people want to do it. But I think the big thing is that there's a lack of conversation with the self.
Yes.
About, well, why do I feel like this?
Yeah.
You know, what am I like? I don't think it's impossible, but everyone should have a therapist, a counselor. You know, in a lot of the Eastern Christian traditions, fathers of confession,
sure.
Which are not just somebody you go to and rattle off a list of what you've done wrong. A lot of the times it's someone to challenge your thoughts, and to discuss your thought patterns with. And so it's really important for everyone to have a mentor like that. And again, it doesn't have to carry the official title of therapist,
right?
But a lot of guys get to this midlife stage never having had one.
Yeah.
And so a lot of thought patterns or just thoughts in general go unchecked, unchallenged. And that becomes kind of difficult.
Yeah.
So you just get lost in your thoughts, and whatever has built up to that point kind of becomes reality.
Absolutely.
good, bad, and indifferent.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, a lot of times bad.
Yeah.
And indifferent is just as bad.
Sure.
Because it's kind of like,
that's a different flavor of a negatively toned. Indifference is a sneaky one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like there, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
You care, but you don't. It's kind of like that one question we got from that one reader where he's like, everything's fine, work's fine. Yeah. Like marriage is fine.
I think you can spot and feel indifference better than you can describe it.
Yeah, because it's more like apathetic. It's like, it's good.
Yep. Before we move on this question, one thing I wanted to add was, this guy, he bought the sports car, wondering if it's midlife crisis. I would actually reply with a question back to him. Is like,
what color did you get?
What kind of car was it? Why are you asking this question in the first place?
Right. Like, what do you feel?
Like, why are you trying to get validated?
Right.
You did it.
Right.
So why are you asking if it's okay?
I think some of the fun poking that he mentioned he's getting is causing him to question it. Mm-hmm. And I would just like to know, sure, great question. Ask it. Yeah. Why? How do you feel one way or another? And whatever answer that is, own it and love it. Right. And you're good. You're good.
My youngest kid just left for college, and suddenly my house and my daily routine is a lot quieter. Mm. After years of balancing parenthood and a demanding career at the same time, I find myself with extra time and not quite sure how to fill it. Honestly, this new stage is making me question what's next for me. I know you've talked about personal growth at midlife. How do you rediscover your sense of purpose and pivot when your family or your kids have left home?
This is not one that I have direct experience with because I still have a 9, 7, and 5. But I get this question a lot, and I see it in a lot of my older peers. Not older by much. They just have older kids, and specifically the ones where like all of them are away. Yeah. And specifically, shout out to all the moms out there, especially the stay-at-home moms. Yep. Stay-at-home mom is a full-time, like thankless, super stressful job. And I've seen that. Even when the kids like become of school age, sure. Forget about just leaving the nest altogether and going to college, but the day is very different because, you were at home with the child and now you're just dropping them off and picking them up and there's a huge gap in the middle. So I see it and I see the angst and the stress that it causes and it's real. Yeah. It's definitely real. So it's like, it's going to happen. It's coming down the pipe. But to this person, I'd say we're learning together.
Sure.
I would imagine it's actually a big shock on the system. Yeah. And I'm very busy anyway. Yeah. But I can't imagine coming home and it's just me and my wife and the kids are not there. Yeah. It sounds kind of sad. Yeah. Because this is what we've known for so long. But in that sadness that I'm even just right now kind of envisioning, I think it's going to create a lot of opportunities for marital growth and probably personal growth too, if for no other reason because there's so much time now.
Sure.
Like, but that's kind of like a grieving period too, I would imagine.
Yeah.
This time that you had that was filled. Yep. That word is important. With all these activities and all these personalities and all these other stresses and worries, now you get a lot of that time back and it's like, what do I do with it?
Yeah.
And you miss the other thing.
Right.
And that's why I said it's kind of like a grieving process, because something really awesome and busy and dynamic is no longer there.
Yeah, there's an empty slot. I don't have direct experience with this either. I have 2 young kids myself, but a couple things. One, to the person who submitted the question, I think take the time to like grieve it. Don't rush into like feeling that so quick.
Yeah, you could probably fill it with a lot of dumb things.
Yeah, and we talked about this in another episode. Like grief is kind of like a spotlight onto what you care about. And so I think, yes, it's sad. Also take time to grieve it, but also highlight the fact that you're feeling this because you care so much about your kids or your family, which is a good thing.
Sure.
So absorb that. I think really like experience that fully, because I think it's part of the process. And then 2 is something called Unlived Lives. So Carl Jung, he says that the most tragic thing for a child's life is the unlived life of a parent.
Sure.
And I think when kids leave, it may be an opportunity for you to visit those unlived lives that you potentially had while raising kids. Maybe you wanted to, get an associate's degree in economic finance or whatever it is, or write a book or whatever. Go back and kind of visit those.
You have the time now.
You have the time.
Yeah.
And see, maybe that sparks some interest. And then thirdly, just by proxy, seeing my parents, they did the best they could with myself and my siblings. But what I have noticed is that I don't even know what the word is. I don't want to say overinvested, but I don't know if they cultivated any interests outside of us.
Look, that part I see. And it's hard because we're actively doing that.
Yeah. And now, they're both at home. We're all doing our own lives, and it's just, there's nothing there.
No, I get it. We become our kids' interests.
Yes.
And we love it, and we take pride and joy. You're doing the jiu-jitsu, I'm doing the basketball and the gymnastics, and it's like, when they're gone, I can't do basketball or gymnastics.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing.
Right.
Tying this back to what we spoke about earlier in the episode about personal boundaries.
Yeah.
And again, that word is funny. Like, people think boundaries and they think like stop sign, like I can't do this, I won't do this. But it's also, it's much deeper than that. It's more like a personal discipline. I think my heart goes out to anyone in that situation, because it's much more dynamic, obviously, than it seems.
There's a thread I'm starting to notice too with the topics we discuss. Is there seems to be this like circle back thing with like find people who are going through the same season.
Yeah.
So empty nest, right? There's a lot of people in that liminal state.
Wow.
So like, reach out, look at Facebook groups, even people you probably made some friends with the elementary and high school parents, like they're doing the same thing.
Sure.
Let's go for hikes on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
I think that's
community,
practical.
engagement, movement, all that stuff.
Yep. Cool. Those are some good questions. Let's do a quote round. I'll toss one up and then we'll go back and forth on it. When you face your own demons, the demons of others aren't as scary.
When you face your own demons, the demons of others aren't as scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a huge thing there with how having compassion for other people's situation is really foreign if you've not had a chance to encounter that compassion for yourself.
Yeah.
It has a lot to do with sin and judgment, and looking at someone and thinking they're very different from you is one thing. 10 years down the line, when you look at another person and you've gone through similar things, you're looking at them completely different.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. For me, it's I don't know who said this, but it's related to this quote. Nothing human is alien to me. And I don't know how to frame this, but if you like, none of us are perfect type of thing. So think back to a mistake you've made. I think we all have that propensity.
Sure.
To be blinded by desires, delusion, anger, greed at some point or another. And you're going to be on the other side of that at one point. And it's like, if you get to know your human complexity in its fullest, then you're able to kind of have a bigger container when something happens to you or inside of a relationship or just at work. It's like, I think your container's a lot bigger to withstand the human propensities that we all have to deal with at one point or another.
Sure. And the easiest way to know someone is to walk a mile in their shoes.
Yeah. We should not pathologize pathology, but rather see it as an autonomous response of the psyche to our choices and priorities, an autonomous refusal to cooperate in further self-alienation.
That's a big one.
I'll read it again.
I can't even pronounce half those words.
We should not pathologize pathology, but rather see it as an autonomous response of the psyche to our choices and priorities, an autonomous refusal to cooperate in further self-alienation.
Oh.
That I referenced, like, instead of having depression as just this standalone evil force.
Sure.
It's like my psyche's trying to tell me something.
Yeah. No, that I understand. Anxiety is not just like in a vacuum.
Yeah.
There's things leading up to it. Sleep choices, diet choices, schedule, busyness, that all factor into these mental health issues that a lot of people are dealing with.
Yeah. What haunts me about this quote is the further self-alienation. It's like when your psyche's trying to tell you something and you ignore that signal and you just keep going.
Yeah.
It's actually a distancing from yourself,
Sure.
which is like at our like deepest, I think we don't want that.
Sure.
But for some reason we just like extend the gap.
I agree. And the physical manifestation of mental health issues is the body, the mind, the heart telling you, hey, there's something else going on.
Yeah.
Something you've been ignoring for a long time.
Yeah. And I think that you alluded to therapy earlier. I think this is kind of still a valuable aspect of therapy or mentorship or counseling, of discerning this right here, of like, what's your psyche telling you?
Right.
Let's kind of dialogue about what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. The real work begins after you fall in love.
The real work begins after you fall in love. Who said that?
Ben Tal-Shahar. He's a Harvard professor, and he's a psychologist on positive psychology and happiness.
Okay, good. So a psychologist is saying that falling in love is basically nothing.
Yeah, it's like the first small step.
And it's fleeting and it's emotional and it's hormonal and it doesn't actually, it's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That feeling is not sustainable. And I think that's what a lot of the West gets wrong in general.
Yeah.
Some stuff happens, you fall in love, happily ever after. No, that's not the way it works. I'll read that quote over and over. The real work begins after you fall in love.
Yes.
Meaning that there's an intentionality that must now take place of work.
Right.
That's frequent, consistent, and I think mainly intentional. I just said it, but I'll say it again. To keeping that relationship nurtured, alive, healthy. And that's really cool. That's what I would want my kids to know. Nobody ever talked to me about those feelings.
Yeah.
And what it meant. My education was Disney movies.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is like, okay, this feels good. But I think a lot of it stems from the huge stresses that relationships endure.
Yeah.
In the West. I mean, all over the world, but like relationship takes work.
Absolutely.
A successful, happy relationship, friendship, marriage, any of them takes work by both parties.
Yeah.
And so I love that quote because it basically just says that feeling is not enough.
Absolutely. There's two things for me on that quote. One is, although it'll take a different form and look very different than in the first, 3 months, 6 months to a year in a relationship versus year 10, I try to think back of like, okay, well, how was I bringing myself to this relationship in the first 6 months?
Sure. How was I presenting?
I was brushing my teeth. I was getting my hair
done.
I was smelling good.
Yeah. How was I presenting? What amount of work did I put into this in the beginning?
Right. And it's like I said, it's going to look different in year 10 versus year 1, but like, is there some form of that effort still being brought to the table?
I mean, this is incredibly relevant to this podcast and people not only at this stage in their life, but approaching the stage in their life.
Yeah.
Just to know, like, the work never stops.
Yeah.
And the minute the work stops, there's fractures.
Yeah.
And this is assuming everything is going right and there's no stresses, there's no in-law problems, personality issues, family of origin,
Tension.
generational things we're trying to break. So to just predicate a successful marriage, I'm going to speak about specifically just on being in love, is wrong.
Yeah.
And dangerous. And it will end. That feeling will go away if there's not a lot of work going in there frequently to make it better.
Yeah.
I think to your point, we put a lot of time and energy in the beginning. And then life gets in the way.
Yeah.
Life, work, kids, and then you're not presenting the same way you were in the beginning.
I think you just got to adapt and find the relative upper range effort in that season.
Correct.
Second thing before more of that, cut. Oh, it's 10. Yeah.
Is it 10 on the dot?
Yeah. 59.
Yeah. Let's go.
Right. We'll finish out this quote section first. This is Dick Notemeyer. He's a strength coach. He says it comes down to 50% genetics, 40% habits, and 10% luck. Where do you go with that?
I got a lot of problems with that.
Okay.
I don't like that.
Tell me why.
My personal experience has told me it's like 90% work ethic. I'm just throwing this out there.
Yeah.
And I've seen that translate in sports and otherwise.
Yep.
I like that he's giving. So he said 50% genetics, 40%
habits.
I love that. I think it's a lot more than that. I think work ethic can be subsumed by habits and vice versa. So that's kind of the same thing.
Yep.
These mics are picking up everything going on outside. Is that going to be a problem for post? It's like talking. It's not even the music. Yeah, as long as you guys are aware of it. Look, the bottom line is to say that 50% is genetics. The way I take that, the way I see it is that, like there's something out of your control that's largely responsible for success. And I don't know what context he made that quote. Is he talking about bodybuilding? Is he talking about like I think context is very important.
I think he's a strength coach, but he specialized in disc throwing, so track and field arena.
To say that genetics do not have something to do with physical performance is probably unfair. But dude, I mean, I think it's really, really funny. You look at the NBA today. Look at Nikola Jokic.
Yep.
There's not much genetics going on there, but he is a monster.
Yep.
So make sure if you post this clip, you put the context here, right? I'm not saying he's not genetically gifted.
Yeah.
But it looks to me like what's responsible for the majority of his success is his maniacal discipline.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't even care when he's blowing everyone off the map. Mm-hmm. You see, you watch these post-game interviews and they're like, hey, you had 3 triple doubles tonight and the most in MVP history, and just accolade after accolade. And you watch his response and he was like, okay. He could care less.
He's like, I can't wait to go back home and ride my horses.
But it's like, again, context is everything. Yep. But look at Luka Doncic. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were riding him for having a celebratory beer. Like, give me a break. Like, genetics, I think it's hard work. And that's the point. Yeah. The point is that, like, hard work beats talent every single time. Mm-hmm. And hard work is something that you're not necessarily born with. That's just a state of mind. That's a discipline that you've acquired. That's a lifestyle almost. Sure. And so I would frame it as that. And I've seen that in business. I've seen that in sports. Yep. I've seen that in all sorts of performance indicators where hard work, like that grit, yep. it beats natural talent every day of the week.
Yep.
So I don't like that quote. But that doesn't mean there's not a lot of insight there, of course.
For sure.
This is my opinion. You know, it's like, it's my show. I get to say what I want.
No, that's a good angle. When I first read it, it reminded me of I forget her name. First name's Sonia, and then her last name is I'm slipping on that. But she did some research around happiness, and like found that we all have like a baseline, predisposed baseline, but 40% of our total happiness is within our agency, so habits. So I thought that was interesting. Like a strength coach has this ratio, psychologist has this ratio on happiness. And I think the through line is like, look, we have a lot of agency in like dictating the direction, regardless of what our baseline is. And with that, it's like, yeah, there's at some point there's effort, regardless of the ratios, some effort has to be involved.
I think effort is the most underrated X factor.
Yeah.
It just really is. And you see, there's no shortage. I mean, there's no shortage of people, business, sports, acting, who just really worked hard at their craft. And of course, there's some genetic factors, but that if you ask any of them,
Yeah.
none of them will say, yeah, I was genetically predispositioned to succeed. No, they're going to tell you about the blood and the sweat and the tears and the years of working their tail off at this thing.
Yep. Cool. Familiar with Terry Real? Does that ring a bell?
No, it doesn't.
So he's known for the fierce intimacy, and I thought this was really cool.
Was that a book?
Yeah, it is.
Fierce Intimacy?
Yeah.
By Terry Real?
By Terry Real. And kind of like the thesis here, I'll just read it. In Fierce Intimacy, explores the cyclical nature of relationships and how balance can be restored amidst conflicts. According to his framework, relationships experience 3 phases. Harmony. This phase symbolizes connection and flow within a relationship where individuals are in sync and feel emotionally secure with one another. Disharmony. Inevitably, disagreements or misalignments disrupt the harmony. This is a normal and natural occurrence, contrary to the idea that disharmony signals failure. The last stage is repair. The repair phase is critical, requiring intentional communication, accountability, and vulnerability to rebuild trust and reconnect after conflict. Real stress is the importance of using moments of disharmony as opportunities for growth and deeper intimacy.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the biggest takeaway I get from that is, so there's 3 phases: harmony, disharmony, and repair.
Right.
And it's just this like beautiful positive feedback loop. But what you said, he says about disharmony is that that's not an indication of failure.
Right.
Disharmony is just, we have to recognize it. Okay, now like what's the next step? Repair.
Yep.
To get us back into harmony.
Right.
And I think that that's a great framework for any and all relationships, business, otherwise. I mean, it's definitely applicable in business.
Yeah.
Where we're going to have phases of harmony. We're going to have phases of disharmony because we're allowed to disagree. We all have different thoughts. We all have different perspectives, and that's totally okay.
Yeah.
It's when that disharmony kind of gets in there and nudges itself and creates a bigger chasm than it should be, where you bring in repair to figure out where we missed each other.
Yep. Yeah. So on paper, right, you read this and it's like, okay, boom, makes sense. 1, 2, 3. For me, I was like, okay, what, particularly from disharmony to repair, that in between stage of like, how do you handle yourself from the moment disharmony happens to getting to repair? Because I feel like that's a stage in itself.
It is.
So you don't go from disharmony straight to repair. There's just like mess in front of me. I'm just like,
right.
What do I do?
There's a back and forth. There's, fighting, disagreeing, hurt, grief.
Right.
I think the biggest thing in my life is recognizing that disharmony is okay.
Right.
For me, any kind of like indication that there was disharmony was really a big problem.
Yeah.
And you kind of just shut down before there's ever an attempt at repair.
Yep.
And that's where a lot of couples, a lot of friendships, a lot of business relationships kind of lose.
Yeah.
But just taking a step back and being like, why are they on this page and I'm on this page?
Yep.
And more importantly, does them being on a different page, is that meant to hurt me? Is that meant to alienate me? Is that meant to disrespect me?
Yeah.
And I see it most with my kids. Now, like 5-6 years ago, when I would literally ask one of my kids to do the same thing 100 times, I would just, go immediately to not immediately, but like, I've asked 5 times now, and like the 6th time is going to be very loud.
Yeah.
And my wife said it one time, and it was pretty poignant. I'm sure she got it from a therapist or something, but for some reason it hit me different that day. It's like, what if they didn't hear you?
Yeah.
And taking a step back so that there's a disharmony there.
Right.
There's some kind of we missed each other.
Yep.
For me to be like, well, they never even heard it. They were in another world.
Yeah.
Doing another thing.
So it wasn't malicious. It was just like,
it very rarely is. But we missed each other nonetheless.
Yeah.
And that creates that disharmony.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to stay there.
Right.
It can get to repair much faster.
Yep. I think for me, that in between stage of disharmony and repair, being able to hold that container is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, we're not repairing or fixing anything right now. It's still a mess. It's still uncertain.
Sometimes you just have to sit in that uncertainty.
And I think, I don't know, for some reason, there's something inside me that, like, if I can inject a phase into that formula, it's like that is just as important as the repair phase. Because if you can't navigate that liminal, you probably won't get to repair.
What I've learned is if you go too fast or don't take time to sit in the mess,
Yeah.
you don't want to sit in it too long.
Right.
You're going to rush to repair the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just pulling boxes of Band-Aids out.
Yeah.
And you're not repairing what needs to be repaired. And that's what's uncomfortable about sitting in the mess, because the mess is usually quite painful.
Yeah.
I'm talking about bigger things here.
Sure.
But it hurts, and the discomfort and the unknown. So you just want to get it done. You want to get it taken care of.
Yep.
But if you rush, you're going to repair the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah. A good point. Fixing the wrong thing. All right. 5-coin story. I'm going to condense this, but essentially there are 2 guys traveling to a monastery. They're walking along. They find 5 coins. And one's like, hey, we should give this to a homeless person. The other guy's like, no, let's keep it and buy some food. And they're just going back and forth on how to use it. And this goes on for hours. They get to a lake, and there's an older guy there. And he's like, what are you guys arguing about? And he's like, hey, my friend, we have these coins. I want 3 of them. He wants 2 of them. He wants to do this. I want to do that. They go on and on. And the guy stands there and starts laughing. He's like, where are the coins? And the guys are like, oh, it's just a hypothetical. And the guy just goes on laughing. And the moral of the story is like, focus on real problems, not imagined ones.
Sure.
How does this impact relationships and business, getting distracted by false problems?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I can say enough about this, and I've said it before. A lot of the anxieties that I used to have were complete hypotheticals. It wasn't actually anything that was happening.
Yeah.
And even in the midst of worrying about things that were happening, I was focusing on multiple iterations, not actually questioning how statistically probable is this iteration. Like, it hasn't even come into fruition yet.
Right.
And so that's where we get the thought and the mindset and the lifestyle that 99% of the things we worry about never actually happen.
It sounds, not to like make fun of you, but it sounds comical when you like say it out loud and just kind of walk through it. It's like, what?
It is, but like, how often do we do that?
I mean, like a lot, too much.
And how often do we recognize in the day
Yeah.
Hey, half the stuff I was really freaking out about today, like, is never going to happen.
Yeah.
Half of the ways I'm worried about this person thinking about me, that person thinking about me, they just went on with their day. They didn't think about me one more time for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
I am just a blip.
Yeah. Do you think, for you personally, does your, I guess, as an analogy, do you think your mind just gets bigger and those just are a smaller thought pattern, or do you get rid of them completely?
I think the goal is to get rid of them completely, which may or may not ever be possible. And that's the struggle.
Sure.
That's the human struggle, where there'll always be things that come up that I put more stock in than I should.
Yeah.
But I just have to stop and say, you're putting too much stock in this. This is not going to happen.
Right.
And it's not to diminish those thoughts, because that's not what anyone's saying.
Yeah.
Because if it was that easy, we wouldn't have all these issues.
Right.
But it's just one thought at a time. Fight your anxiety one thought at a time.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. You can just fight one battle at a time.
I think the phrase, what are the real challenges and what are the imagined ones right now is kind of a down to earth like mantra, if you will.
We make a lot of imagined ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I want your perspective on this. I think you're going to share some good stuff on this one. So 5 causes of spiritual crisis. I'm going to just walk through them real quick, the 5, and then we can kind of unpack them. 1 is trauma, personal or cultural, deep emotional wounds from past personal events or larger cultural experiences that kind of shake us. Number 2, swampland visitations. These refer to periods in life when individuals are forced into emotional swamplands, experiencing moments of profound loss or existential questioning. These phases aim to deepen self-awareness and personal growth. Number 3, discrepancies between expectations and outcomes. When life does not align with one's plans or expectations, it creates an inner conflict. Number 4, incongruence between map and terrain. The map represents one's mental framework or worldview, while the terrain is reality. There's a disconnection which causes tension. Last one, number 5, dystonic relationship between false and natural self. This tension between societal pressures, quote unquote, false self, and one's true identity, natural self, generates inner turmoil. So these are kind of like the basket of 5 things that can cause spiritual or personal crisis. Let's start with trauma, like personal experience, and then larger overview of that.
Yeah, traumas can happen many different ways.
Yep.
And a lot of them are indexed in our minds and shut away forever.
Yep.
Until we're forced to come to terms with them or figure out, like, what is it that I've been hiding in that box?
Yep.
A lot of times people don't even know. A lot of things happen in our early childhood, which just happen. We're living in them and kind of just going through the motions, and they become the set of lenses with which we see and process everything.
Yeah.
And so it's about undoing those lenses to whatever extent that you can.
Sure.
And that one's tough for a lot of people because not a lot of people know that stuff is there.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. For trauma, for me, it's like, because of the chosen field I'm like studying, like once I kind of learn these things, it's like you can't unlearn them.
Sure.
And so for me, I think one of the larger takeaways is like helping me develop compassion for everyone, because like you walk in this office or a mall or the park, do I dare say everyone, at least most, have stuff.
All of them.
And so it's like,
Everyone's
man, once you tap into that, it's like
everyone is going through something. I would be shocked if it wasn't everyone. You just don't know what they're going through or when they're going through it.
Yeah.
But everyone's got something, some deep personal struggle, trauma, character defect, and most people are doing the best that they can.
Yeah.
I think that's where the number goes from everyone to most. And there are some people that will never know how much they're going through and how good they're trying.
Sure.
And so I think the constant pursuit of that compassion is really, really important because you see people in a completely different light.
Absolutely. Yeah. Swampland visitations. So when you're forced into emotional swamplands, experiencing moments of profound loss or existential questioning.
I like the analogy of the swampland because sometimes that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a murky, mucky, it's like, it's not dark, but it's not light. It's more unknown and uncomfortable. If you've ever been to a swamp,
Yep.
which last time was a long time, but Everglades in Florida, humid, wet, just generally uncomfortable. There's alligators everywhere. It's just, and that's sometimes how loss is. It's not necessarily like a dark storm. Dare I say that the majority of loss is the unknown.
Yeah.
That like you can't see in that moment. It's there.
Right.
It's just because it's unknown.
Sure.
You don't know what it's going to look like in a week, in a month, in a year, and that's a big hill to climb.
Sure. Yeah, swampland visitations. Trying to recall a personal memory. It was probably sometime mid last year, and I had a friend with good intent, was like trying to help with something I was going through, and it got to a point where I was like, man, like I love you, I appreciate you, but I think I need to actually go through this. I need to like dissent in a way that doesn't harm myself or others, but I need to like kind of let this swampland be something I experience. And I don't know, I'm still trying to understand where that came from or if it was wise for me to kind of frame it that way. But it felt like resisting it was not the move.
No, resisting loss and grief is sometimes it when it's time to heal, we don't know what there is to heal.
Yeah.
Because we haven't confronted it.
Right.
Sat in it.
Yep.
Processed it.
Now that there's been some time, I also think about it in terms of like, what would I have not gained if I hadn't gone through it?
Sure.
You mentioned earlier, like rushing to fix things, you end up fixing the wrong things. I think it's a similar sentiment of like, at least once in your life, you're going to get a visitation from one of these swamplands.
Sure.
And it's not fun. It's not comfortable, but there is wisdom in it if you're open to it. Discrepancies between expectations and outcomes. So when life doesn't align with your plans or expectations, it creates conflict. How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's tough because we all have these grand expectations. And I think the only expectation to have right now is don't have too many expectations. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
We can expect to be happy and safe. We can expect to love and have intimacy and connection. These are all good things. But we have to temper expectations. Life is not fair.
Yeah.
And things happen. That doesn't mean life is not worth being lived to the fullest. Not at all. But we just need to be really cognizant of what our expectations are. I think with regards to expectations, the biggest thing here is our expectations of people. We hold people up to really, really high. We have high expectations of people, and people let us down. And I think that descends into many things.
Yeah.
Because people will generally let you down.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it was intentional, and it doesn't mean anything about really much other than we're all imperfect.
Yep.
And we let our spouses down, we let ourselves down, and that's okay to have that grace as long as you know it's okay to be let down.
Yeah, that kind of level sets it a little bit. Ryan Holiday, he's an author, he says, have high standards for yourself and be tolerant of others.
Yeah.
I guess that fits a little bit.
Yeah. And even in that, I would say still have grace for yourself.
Yeah.
As much as you would have for others.
Yep. Incongruence between map and terrain.
Incongruence between map and terrain. That one's deep.
I think this is probably the most relevant to like midlife.
Yeah, because what you're going through doesn't necessarily match up with the map.
Right.
Right. And I think what that's saying is you expected this, but you got this. Or you want to expect this, but you couldn't expect it. And it is really all about just taking stock of where you are. So like a lot of these people that, write in that say, I've done this and this and this, but I still feel like that's the map tells you should be super happy and super fulfilled. And the terrain tells you not that much.
Yeah.
Like it looks different on the map than what it is I'm expecting.
Yeah.
And the best way to level set that, to use your words, is gratitude. That you even have a terrain.
Yeah.
That you even got a map. Maybe it wasn't the greatest map, or maybe it took you someplace off grid.
Yep.
But you have a map and you have a terrain. You could switch them both. You can change them both.
Right.
You can change the map and the terrain. That's huge.
Are there any maps that worked for you for a long time that you've had to either like reiterate or let go in the past 5-10 years?
Yeah, I've had to change a lot of them. Because you come to find that the journey was not what you thought it was going to be or where you thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And so you kind of just have to rewrite that map, and that's fine. But the internal map, the internal map of faith is always that North Star.
Sure.
And I think that's the one that's doing all the editing.
Good way to put it. Love that. The disconnected relationship between the false self and the natural self. So the tension between societal pressures, quote unquote, false self, and one's true identity, natural self, generates inner turmoil. How have you navigated that over the years?
Yeah, that's another tough one. Society has all these prescriptions for who I should be and how I should do things. Mm-hmm. It has a prescription for what my daily routine should look like, how my marriage should look, the cars I should drive, and on and on and on.
Yep.
And the person that I'm naturally trying to be, or I am naturally, sometimes is at odds with that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times because I'm not okay with my station, because I look at that and I'm like, it should be that. I wish it was that. That's not cool or fair either.
Put a pin in that. I want to ask you something related to it. You say my station.
Yeah.
Do you think if we were not exposed or conditioned to anything else, that you'd be okay with your station?
Yes.
And so is it too simplistic to say that if we did not condition ourselves to compare, our station would be okay?
Yes.
Why don't we do that? I'm guilty of it too.
You have to turn off a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And it's just hard.
Yeah.
You could not have social media. There's still going to be billboards.
Right.
And TV.
Yep.
And so it just all goes back to kind of gratitude, because gratitude's in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Right? You're grateful just in a vacuum of everything else that's happening, or what he has or what she has.
Yeah.
That's how it should be. But the simple answer to that question is yes. If I wasn't constantly distracted by everything that's competing for my attention, my station would be more than enough. How do I get to that place every single day?
That seems like the call. Even though it's not like materially quantified or even revered, I feel like that's like the true call of a life.
For a lot of people in a lot of cultures during a lot of different periods of time. I think we're all done. What do you think?
Good. Love you, man.